Valentine's Day is just around the corner and I've been craving something chocolatey and satisfying, but I don't have many ingredients on hand, so I had to find the simplest chocolate cake recipe out there. Today's recipe is based on Little Luna's recipe that I've linked down below, and I'm curious to know if we can make a delicious chocolate cake using only pantry staples. To make this, I got some all-purpose flour, milk, white sugar, cocoa powder, vanilla extract, baking soda, baking powder, eggs, salt, vegetable oil, boiling water, powdered sugar, and softened butter. I'm making a single layer cake, so I cut the amount used in half. I started by mixing together the all-purpose flour, cocoa powder, baking soda, and salt in a large bowl. By sifting the dry ingredients through a fine mesh strainer, I was able to get the lumps out with a spoon, which cocoa powder is notoriously known for. I also made the mistake of leaving out the sugar at this point, but more on that later. Next, I cracked an egg into a large measuring cup and whisked it briefly to blend the yolk and the white. Then I added in the vegetable oil, milk, and pure vanilla extract. Use the real kind if you can, and only the imitation fake stuff as a last resort. Whisk that all together until well blended and it turns into a pale yellow color. Then, pour the egg mixture into the flour and cocoa powder and mix it gently until it starts to come together. The batter became quite thick at this point, and once it got difficult to stir, I added in the hot water to loosen it up. At this point, there were many lumps that took a little bit of time to get rid of by using the back of a spoon. Eventually, I got the batter as smooth as I could and was ready to pour it into the cake tin when I realized that I had left out the sugar. It'd be a very sad and bitter cake if I left that out, so thank goodness I caught it at this point. I added in the white sugar and it dissolved fairly quickly, probably due to the hot water as I stirred it in. The cake batter should be fairly runny in consistency and ready to go into a 9-inch round cake tin lined with parchment paper on the bottom and buttered and dusted with cocoa powder on the sides to prevent sticking. I poured the batter into the pan and scraped the bowl clean to not waste any of it. Then I baked the cake in a preheated 350 Fahrenheit oven for about 30 to 35 minutes. It took around 33 minutes in my oven to cook, and I took it out and tested it with the toothpick test. If it comes out clean or just with a few cooked crumbs, it's done. I flipped it over onto a plate and removed the parchment paper. It came off very easily without having to cut around the edges. I flipped it back over and then set it aside to cool completely before frosting. Very, very important that it cools absolutely completely, otherwise the frosting will melt. While the cake was baking and cooling, I worked on the chocolate buttercream frosting by sifting together more cocoa powder and powdered sugar. Both of these will have lumps, so it needed to be broken up with the back of a spoon through a mesh strainer. I added in a pinch of salt and mixed everything together briefly before setting it aside. Next, I whipped the softened butter until it was lighter and fluffy using an electric mixer. Then added in the cocoa powder sugar mixture. It has been a couple years since I've made frosting of any kind, so this was quite an experience. I had some trouble with the powder puffing up everywhere when I turned the mixer on because it started out extremely dry. So if I were to make this again, I'd probably just throw all the ingredients together at the start and just mix everything by hand. Nonetheless, I added in the vanilla extract and a tablespoon or two of milk at a time and beat everything together until it had the consistency of frosting that I wanted. If it's too thick, just add more milk slowly. You don't want to overshoot it and make it too thin, or you will need to add even more powdered sugar to stiffen the frosting back up, which it really does not need. I will note here that I only used 2/3 of the amount of sugar that the recipe called for. The frosting was plenty sweet and perfect, even with this reduced amount of sugar. Once the frosting looked ready, I brought the cake back and slathered a giant heap of it over the top and began spreading it all over. For this cake, I just kept it simple and frosted the top with none on the sides. It was easier to do and makes it look more rustic, which I love. To give it even more of a decorative feel, I used the back of a spoon to create some nice swoops on top. Then it's ready to serve. I think this cake is even better the next day after storing in the fridge when all the flavors have a chance to melt further and the frosting sets. And I cannot wait to take a bite of this. Yum, yum. Okay, chocolate cake with the chocolate buttercream frosting. It's really good. The frosting has a really nice texture to it, and the cake itself is really moist. It's delicious, chocolatey, Definitely satisfies my cravings for that chocolate. If I were to make this again, I would probably bake it in an 8-inch round pan just to have a little bit more height on the cake. And I'd probably garnish it with some chocolate shavings as well. But I might even make a double layer cake next time. What I think is most important in this recipe is the type of cocoa powder that you use, because that's gonna really determine how good that chocolate flavor is gonna be. And yeah, I'm just blown away by how good this is. Simple ingredients can make a delicious chocolate cake. And if you're in a rush and you don't have any time and Valentine's Day is coming up soon, make this cake. It's gonna impress your significant other, or just make it for yourself as well. I'll see you all next time.